Aaron, Taylor, so I really do appreciate it. It's fun to talk to pathologists. It's, you know, the club that we all belong to, and so it gets, it's an easy thing to do. And there's always some filler slides. So we went to Yellowstone in the middle of January, and that's what that is. Oh my gosh, it was a pretty rigorous hiking. Those are the yurts we stayed in, and that's 5 feet of snow. I'd recommend the trip to anybody. We lucked out with the temperature. The worst I saw was minus 12, and that was one of the reasons we wanted to go. Yeah, so it was a fabulous trip. Never would have thought of it, but a buddy came up with it. Okay, so this is my last goal. Some sort of standardization and validation of oncology. And while I enjoy giving the talk and feel relaxed this morning, it's to colleagues, Path. And I can make it a very simple seminar, Tony, and it'll be over in another 2 minutes. I just want to standardize some of what we do when we look at histopath or scanned-in images of the tumors. That's what I want you to acknowledge, that we haven't ever determined the area in which we're counting mitotic figures. So this is what I would like joint pathology, old AFIP, to do on your reports. Do exactly what you've been doing, count the mitotic figures, but then report it as a mitotic count. Tell the oncologist it's 10 high-powered fields, because that's what you did. Isn't that true? That's what you're doing. And put in parentheses what that area is. Huh. All right. So if you agree, I'm done. If don't necessarily, or you want to get your money's worth, I'll just keep going on with my slides. Once you do it and you put it in your macro, poof, it's over. Right now you've got something in your macro, so that's what I'd like you to add. Some people had seen some editorial I wrote on standardization, but this is actually the 2 years ago, there was another one. And that's where we put this information out. Oh my gosh, so few people are doing it. So what I'm after now is 1, standardization, or 2, getting people to agree to do this, because 10 high-powered fields is not a unit of area. Huh. 1989, so I'm 30 years out of date. And this is what some MDs put in Lancet. This is fake news. This is exaggerated stuff, but I can show how it happens. 600% variation in the size of a high-powered field. Oh my gosh. But that's a little bit of fake news to win you over. And what these folks were saying, that depending on what objective was used, 25, 50, or 100x, you got variation. How do I get rid of this, Sarah?
Is it the arrow at the bottom?
Little arrow at the bottom. Okay. Oh, I guess not.
How's that? That's far.
Is that good? That's
Yeah, I think that's okay. Yeah. I can't believe I actually solved something with a computer, but it's moved over to the side at least a little bit. The objective actually is not as, is very critical, but it's the ocular that's the limited distance for the diameter of the field of view that you're going to see. So they came up with these terms. The high-powered field's unscientific unless the measurement is standardized. It really is. This is what the MDs have over us. 2,400 breast carcinomas. I don't know if there's any vet study yet with 2,400 biopsies in it. They have the numbers that back up what they do, and of course the statistics. And that's what we're going to need to do at some point along the way. Do you think that's going to move it forward? Oh, yeah. So that's what I'd like to do, standardize how we report mitotic counts. It's something we all do with tumors. It's gotten to the point we do it even when there's not outcome assessment for the mitotic count. And the oncologists want us to give it, even if it's a tumor, squamous cell carcinoma of a horse, and there is no data to say what it correlates to. I just give it to them now. But first off, it is the mitotic count. And it's not the mitotic index as we've reported for years, because the mitotic index is that. It's an index. It's a percent. It would be the number of mitoses divided by the total number of cells. God forbid Meuten or anybody else should say, let's start counting all the cells in the field. So no, right now we do a mitotic count. We just called it mitotic index, and that's what you'll see in multiple manuscripts. So that's what we've done for years. Just keep doing it. But now I'd like to define the area in which it was counted. I can verify that that area could vary between 100 and 200%. So first, and that's the secret word, agree, more than standardize, because Williams wants to do it his way. Alves wants to do it his way. Stromberg wants to do it his way. They all agree on let's standardize, but no, I don't want to do it your way, Meuten. That's the tricky part, to get agreement on this. And I hope in this, quote, small group that has major impact on veterinary pathology, if I can get you folks aligned with this and say, yeah, let's do it, oh, it'd be a huge step moving forward. So that's the term, that's the area. This does not define an area, and then I'm going to keep going. I will advance the troops through Morocco. So next I would be, well, where should we do the count? The MDs suggest you do it at the periphery of the tumor. It's invasive. It should be predictive of the most aggressive behavior, and you'd go at that junction of neoplastic and non-neoplastic. And we already do this, don't we? Avoid regions made cell poor because there's hemorrhage, necrosis, cyst, and so forth. Then we need to define what a mitotic figure is. Oh, give me a break, Meuten. You're not going to get into that stuff. I think eventually we should get rid of percent necrosis, but I'll expand on that in just a little bit. And then what am I going to do? Keep going. Standardize the terms that we use. We shouldn't call these the tumor-free margin. You don't know what the tumor-free margin is. That's in the dog, that's in the cat. We know what the histologic free margin is that's on the glass slide. That's the term we should use. Two, we have to acknowledge there's shrinkage once it gets on that slide. So it doesn't represent the actual tumor-free margin that's in the patient. This is something Paul came up with, that we could just estimate distances, and I'll wait on that. But look, we got to standardize all the parameters. What was the primer used for PAR? What were the antibodies used for flow cytometry? When you get ready to compare different manuscripts, the methodologies for standard parameters should be the same. Results will not replicate exactly, but methodologies should. And then for my oncologist buddies, they've got to do as careful a job as we do in assessing the histologic section, outcome assessment. So these initials stands for different groups that have worked on it. So now I've updated it a little bit, at least we're up to 2017. That's the term that I'd like you folks to use. So in theory, all that you have to do is add parentheses, 2.37 square millimeters afterwards. Where did this come from? Oh, yeah. Aaron?
Have we established that all of our scopes here are
Have I?
Yeah.
I have 40 X same on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Aaron said, the seminar's taking too long. Let's speed it up. What she said, if I heard you just right, Aaron, so you've gone through your scopes and everybody has an ocular with 22, then we're on board. That means, quote, you could do it. Yeah, that one's 22 over there. It was one of the first ones I looked at when I came in, Sarah. And I looked at Tony's, this is 22. I looked at Bruce. So I'm glad that you've already gone through there and done that. And then these are the people I give credit to. Jeannie George, who passed away last year, clinical pathologist. Fran Moore, clinical pathologist. We got company, huh, Jennifer? And she's in anatomic as well. Well, Jeannie discovered this back in 1999 when she was estimating how many platelets are in an oil immersion field is a rough estimate of normal. And she realized from reading that the ocular was a limiting factor. More, I can't say more so than the objective, but if you all use the same objective, 40, then the key thing is what that ocular is. And so that field number that's on the ocular predicts it. And then the way the calculation comes out is that whatever number was written up there, on this one it's 20, so there's 20, you divide it by your 40x objective, and that means the diameter of the field of view is 0.5. Then you plug in a circle, the area for a circle, and you come up with a number. I would like everybody to have had 20 millimeter oculars. So I checked with Olympus, I checked with Nikon. The most common ocular that's made for pathologists is 22. 20 is less expensive, so that's what goes on student scopes, and some of them out in private practices and so forth. So 22 ends up with a mouthful. John Harvey, when I gave the seminar down at Florida, said, oh my gosh, Don, why is it 2.37? Why couldn't you round it off? Or why couldn't it? Well, that's where it came from. So I didn't choose the ocular that's being published, but that's it. The objective really doesn't matter. So whether you got a $10,000 Plan Apo or where you have a more economical Acromat, it doesn't matter. It's going to be the same field of view area that's coming through here. On your objectives, you might see another number. So you could look on some of your objectives and see if you see 4, 1. That, and I didn't know all this stuff, that has to do with resolution of the objective, how good it is. So the higher that number is, the more likely it's on Dr. Alves' scope. The lower the number is, the more likely it's on the resonance objective. And then it's more economical as well. But don't worry about that if you see it and say, Meuten missed that part of it. And then here's my visualization for Stromberg, who needs pictures to be convinced this really makes a difference. There's an FN of 18. That would be the diameter. There's a 26. That's wide. So the bigger that number, the wider the field of view. Somebody using a 26.5 sees this area. Somebody using an 18 sees this area. There's going to be a difference in the number of mitotic figures counted. Wow. I can confirm 100% fake news. I can make it up to 600%. Once you agree, Aaron, and said, yeah, let's just do it, then I can stop this sales pitch to try to get everybody lined up with it. And you probably should do this. Take a micrometer and just confirm for your 22 FN ocular that it's 0.55 across. Well, the bad thing about Facebook is I can't use any names. So I'll just say a person in Canada said, no, mine's 0.53. For Dr. King and me, that's good enough. That's close enough. And I don't know if you measure it and you get 0.54 or 0.52, is that you? Is that the stage micrometer? The scope people tell me 99% precision. Just go ahead and use what's there. Taylor?
I know we're trying to get everyone on the same page, and I'm just curious with some of the articles that have come out in the past couple of years where the mitotic count is critical, like malignant melanoma, soft tissue sarcoma. Have we checked to see, is it 40x, FN 22? Are we good?
We're not good.
Yeah.
Houston, we're going to stay on the ground.
Right.
And so there'll be a slide that comes up in a minute that really says just what you did. Oh my gosh. Patnick, Bostic, Spangler. I better not say current names like Kupel. It's not reported. So, well, I'll get to it. The good news is the seminar was almost over. You should measure it, just make sure. And as long as it's close to that 0.55, that's fine. The reason I want to use an area and not 10 high-powered fields, we're switching over to scanned images. IDEX, Antec, many other places, now they scan it in. 10 high-power fields doesn't mean anything for a scanned image. You need to count 2.37. We all need to enumerate the same area. So in that manuscript with Jeannie George and Fran Moore, table 2 will provide how you do that if you got a scanned image. Here's a friend, sends this to me, does most of it on screened images. That's what it measured, built-in ruler, comes up with that. So he counts 10 fields, comes up with 1.1. You're counting 2.37, twice as big an area. So from that table, I suggested to him, you'd be better off counting 20 fields. You got to double the area. So I don't know how many reports get sent out with that. So my goal, and then you react to this. There's your name, Joint Pathology Center. Do you want to see that on Facebook? Because doesn't this sort of imply that maybe you folks are in agreement? So for Facebook, no, that's not what this says. My goal is to get you folks, IDEX, Antech, diagnostic labs across the world to start measuring, counting in the same area, and then use this term, whether it's a scanned image or with this. All right, now we're starting to get to Taylor's question. Here's the hero. He did it back in the 80s. That's the area they recommended for human tumors that they count in. Oh my gosh, that's considerably less. He hasn't ever responded to any of my emails. This thing must be on some time system. Oh, maybe that's what keeps me on time. When that goes blank, stop talking. My guess is he probably had a Zeiss scope, and my guess is his eyepiece was an 18. Then I can come up with this area. So that's how important this could be. So if you go down here on the bottom, between this ocular and this ocular, there's 100% difference. Dr. Chance, does it matter? Here's an example where if you counted 14 mitotic figures with this, because it's wider, you have 7 with this. What's the impact on the patient? If you're looking at a soft tissue sarcoma, and I want to change that name to soft tissue mesenchymal tumor, now we're talking about amputation and chemotherapy, as opposed to no amputation, excision. Bingo. Huge impact that it could be. Here's 3 different oculars that are present there, and that states what I said earlier. That's the most common, and that's why I chose it. If you want to see it online so you don't have to check my numbers, see if we did the math right, you can go there. There's online publications. When this is going to matter, Taylor, is when we're close to the cutoff. So here's one where I chose oculars that are closer, 20 and 22. That's only about a 30% difference. That may not be too critical. But if you're right at that cutoff, then it could be. Well, the tumor where that could really have impact on is melanoma, because those are low counts, 3s and 4s. So is there clinical significance? I'd say without a doubt, because we use it for prognosis. 85% of these dogs with this count should live 1 year. They use it for predicting treatment, so the difference between prognosis and treatment. So does it matter? I'd say without a doubt, and especially if the mitotic count is near a cutoff. It's been established by publications, Taylor, for which they didn't tell us the area they counted them in. But we still refer to those manuscripts. So Dr. Williams says, come on, I got to count a 0. I don't care if I got a wide field or a narrow field, 0. He's probably right. It doesn't matter. Stromberg says, I got to count a 30. I don't think it matters. Yeah, it probably doesn't for those. But if you're close to one of those cutoffs, or you're working with a tumor where the mitotic count has been established as low, yeah, this could have significant impact. And this change is easy. You don't have to do anything. You look at your ocular and you already did that. It's 22. All that I'm asking is that you put that number in parentheses after you report the count. The oncologist, in theory, should be happy because you said 10 high-powered fields. Is that what's in your present reports, 10 high-powered fields? Yeah. So just add this, if you could, afterwards. You define the area. If the oncologist calls up and said, hey, what's this? Say, we're ahead of this game. We're starting to define the area, and then that's what we'll do from this point future, especially if you repeat any studies that go along with this. And if it's a scanned image, this is defunct. It isn't 10 high-power fields. You just report 2.37 and you count the numbers. This is the melanoma story, and as you know, whether it's oral or whether cutaneous, that mitotic count independently has been shown to provide a prognosis. But we're talking about a low number now, not like soft tissue mesenchymal tumors. 0 to 9, 10 to 19, greater than 19. So this could have real impact on some of these tumors. And here's Dr. Chance's point. Prognosis. That's what's in the literature. It's wrong. We need to start calling it the mitotic count. Does it matter? Yeah, because that's used alone or it's used in grade. And how did I stumble onto this? When I was putting the book together for Dr. Moulton, I tried to look at different manuscripts. So Patnick had 83 cases. These authors together, I can come up with 1,100 cases of mast cell tumor. The next one's going to be soft tissue, 350. And then I started to look at their methods. Nobody stated what area they were counted in. And I started calling friends and said, do you think it matters? And we started off saying no. And now I think it really does have impact. So we got to be careful. Now this is a problem with Facebook. Names are showing up. Deceased or active. This is a fun one, and I called him over the phone, so I think it's okay to state this. That's the paper where they used a mitotic count of 5 for mast cell tumors as their cutoff and prediction. Well, he stated the area, 2.77. So I called him up and said, how did you come up with that? What do you think his answer was? I got no idea. So he called the pathologist where they did it and determined that it was an FN of 22, and so the area was 2.37. But it wasn't, so there's one where there's even an error that's in the literature. Look, even more current manuscripts where we're using the 2-tier, I don't see it. Here's 2015, 400 cases. I can go on and on with this. Now, there's other markers. You don't have to use mitotic counts. But once you get into some of these other specialized, now it's cost, now it's time, and now it's expertise. Do you have it? Hey, all pathologists can count mitotic figures. We all do that wherever we are. At work, at home. There's soft tissue mesenchymal tumors. I really think we need to stop calling them sarcomas. Most of them are not sarcomas. The majority of that tumor is perivascular wall tumors, and 85% of those are not aggressive. So I wish for the clinicians, we'd stop labeling them as sarcomas, and then we look at the tumor and we evaluate whether it's aggressive or not. So Bostic's paper, Kuntz's paper, nothing about the area that they're counted in, and we're all using, I think, those are the main 2 manuscripts we use to give some protection. McSporin, the same thing that's present. If you look at the Kuntz manuscript, and now I've used the name, I got to change that for the future, Bruce, they'll say that the mitotic count was in fact independently prognostic. And if you read the manuscript, they use the cutoff of 10% necrosis. As far as I know, no pathologist reports out 10% necrosis as being predictive of anything for soft tissue sarcomas. We all use 50% to establish the grade. But if you look at the manuscript, it's based on this. So, and then here's the melanoma story. What's this mean, Dr. Everybody? You can repeat all these studies if you wanted to. Go back and look at mast cell tumors, look at soft tissue tumors, look at melanomas, and determine, does the area count, did the numbers change? One part of this study you can do without oncologists. The second part of the study, to do this, you're going to need oncologists. Have I kind of sold this idea that it has value and it would be easy to do? Well, the next one is we've got to define mitotic figures. I used got to somewhat loosely. I don't know. That one is. What about this one? That one is, that might even be an abnormal one where we've got fragments that are coming off. If you got 8 in one field, I really don't care what the FN it was on your ocular. One or two mitotic figures. I mean, I say one or two mitotic figures. So some of these come from Harold Tweeden. Some of them come from a friend, Tina Mishner, these photographs. So you got to give credit to everybody. And sometimes I don't do as good a job as I should. Well, the same guy, Van Diest, defined what you're going to call a mitotic figure. And we should do that once. And then people just get to cite Stromberg. There's no nuclear membrane. you have these little hairy extensions that come off. You can read it as well as me going through it. But here's the point I want to make. In this original pub in 1984, he stated that 2 parallel, clearly separate chromosomal packages should be counted separately as 2. Bzzz, I don't think so. So we need to get together and say, look, if it's anaphase or telophase, let's call it 1. We need to standardize what we do. Similarly, the more eosinophilic that cytoplasm is, the more likely it's apoptosis, and it's not a mitotic figure. This group could do that. That's what you do for a living. Think how easy it would be. Isn't this going to be fun? Look at all the different pictures we get to define and name and then get to publish. All right, I'm not going to go that far. Nor am I going to go this far that we need to start identifying abnormal mitoses, little tags that are left, tripolar. But somebody needs to do the study, Taylor, and find out. Do abnormal mitoses correlate with an outcome? Does count correlate with some sort of outcome? So these are all terms that are out there, yada, yada. But you got to make sure that you can identify apoptosis from some other phase. I won't spend time on that. So mutant, you got to be kidding. We're going to define mitotic figures. I've been doing paths for 40 years, and we're going to go back. You're taking me back to the 60s. Everything's molecular. This is out of the lab at NC State with Dr. Brin and Shapiro, and this is how they're confirming transitional cell carcinomas, urothelial carcinomas are in the bladder. That's molecular. That's where it's at. It's not counting mitotic figures. So, artificial intelligence, molecular techniques, they've been coming to a planet near us for a long time, but they haven't replaced us yet. Everyone says it's coming. These are all the other molecular techniques, and there's many more, and then gene signatures. I'm all for this. Do it without a doubt. If you do these, if you do this, correlate it back to something that everybody else can do wherever they're sitting. Mitotic counts. So advance, also hold the fort, and determine if mitotic counts are important. So I think we missed a basic concept along the way. We haven't told this to the oncologist. We don't know if those old counts that we're using to predict and that you're using for either prediction or prognosis, if they really are the same that we're now reporting out today. So the exact results will not replicate, but the methods must. We got to standardize what we're doing. I can't think of a better place for standardization than the military. What's the SOP? Follow it. I'm all for new techniques. So if you want to do tissue arrays, do it. But please correlate it back with mitotic count. If you want to look at Ki67, cyclin, do it. But then don't report that alone as a standalone test, but report it back to something that we're all going to do. So there's other ways that you can evaluate mitotic figures. So new, old, and compare those two. That's the big word there. But always use that standard size area that we're going to compare to. We all can do it. It's affordable. They're used to seeing it. If a new technique comes out, what's the cost? What's the expertise? And what's the time factor? You know how quickly you can count out mitotic figures and get that reported. The first part of this, we don't need oncologists for. The second part, we got to have oncologists because outcome assessment is our grade. If I say it's aggressive, I say it's a carcinoma, and the dog's alive 2 years later, in a dog's life, that's a long time. I don't think I was right. So we have to have accurate outcome assessments, and that one's tricky. And then here's the third step that nobody does in vet medicine. We don't validate a study. It came out of Georgia. We accept it. We all start using it. But nobody validated that study in Carolina, across the whole country. All that we know is that that population of dogs in Georgia that was studied by that one pathologist, or maybe three, correlated with outcome assessment. Now you need to do the same materials and methods that they used, but in a different population of dogs, and see if in fact it was validated, that it was predictive. So it's not going good for me, guys. I'm going around trying to get agreement, and that's been the reaction. They're beating me up. So I've come here among friends in the hopes that I can convince you folks. So it's actually on a horse. Sarah, how do you clean yourself up when that happens out in the woods? Yeah. Yeah, you got water, you got a towel, you got a tail. It's okay. Oh, no, I got more stuff. Some of these I've got to read and make sure I've got which study it is. Oh yeah, this is using artificial intelligence and determining the mitoses that are present. So mitotic counts should be great for automated systems and this artificial intelligence. This is what they got to do. What you do in most of the time a split second, or sometimes you might take 2 or 3 seconds to look at one if you're not sure. You've got to train that machine to recognize density, hairy extensions, and how far apart they are. This particular individual explained some nice things to me. This would be the grid they use to define a certain area. There's contest with monetary awards for who can develop the software to most closely correlate the counts with what the pathologist came up with. But the machine has to be trained. It's not automatic. And what they explained to me was how far apart, how dense these structures are, that's got to go into the machine. And there's got to be thousands of images put into it and then identified. What I'm leading up to is going to be monetary costs. Here's comparison of deep learning algorithms with people. Pathologist versus machine. And there's the manuscript, so I'm getting a little more current with my stuff now, Bruce, up to 2017. The problems are training the machine. So when they looked at these results, the machine was just as good as the pathologist. And in fact, it was faster, had big data sets, technicians could run it. Those are all positive. The startup cost, you're going to price vet medicine out of this stuff. Number 2, you got to read the materials and methods on some of these studies. So they looked at various criterion along the way. 2 hours to review 129 slides, test slides. That was less than a minute a slide they gave the pathologist. That's unrealistic. So the years of experience with the pathologist, and then if you gave the pathologist more time than that, but for these guys, what they're looking at is big data sets and how fast you can produce them. Then the human was just as good as the machine. And remember, the machine is the one that's getting trained. So these were ones that were recognized by artificial intelligence, and these are ones not recognized by artificial intelligence. When I give this talk to the clinicians, I say no snickering, but all 11 pathologists had to agree on what they were defining each one as. What was the mitotic figure, what was the apoptosis, and so forth. And that's what they went back to the machine with. What the heck? Meuten's got plants coming into a pathology talk? This is why I don't think this is going to be used in vet path, maybe industry, maybe Mitch Troutman, but I don't think we in the diagnostic labs are going to be doing it because there's not enough money at stake. So here's artificial intelligence in the agricultural industry. They use it to thin lettuce. They use it to selectively spray on insecticides. So you look at the cotton plants, it identifies it's out of the row, and then they put in 1 million images into the computer so it can train what a weed looks like compared to the cotton plant. some degree of that has to happen with AI for counting mitotic figures. We're not plugging in 1 million counts, 500,000, 1,000 counts for VetPath. So I think we're safe. The idea of molecular AI replacing us, it's going to be slow. I'll be dead. Maybe Sarah can do it at some point, but I don't know. But in agriculture, in industry, yes. Then you can justify some of these expenses. But I think in vet medicine, VetPath, we're okay. All right. I like mitotic counts. Here's a manuscript, 2013. Mitotic counts are overestimated if it's a breast carcinoma from a woman in a resected specimen compared to a core biopsy. So you want to do another study, Taylor? You work with a surgeon. They do the core biopsy of the mast cell tumor or the soft tissue sarcoma. You get your count. Now cut the tumor off. Now put it in fixation and now repeat the counts. What she found was there were 3 times greater count in the resected specimen compared to the biopsy. That changed treatment for these women. The contention was, and I took her name off because I might misquote. Yeah, don't ever say Meuten said, because a whole bunch of people are going to eventually say, who's Meuten? And number 2, that may not be what I said, but it's what you heard. So I took their name off because I might misquote them. But this resulted in combined tumor grades. 25% of them were a higher grade, and therefore treatment changed. They also determined the mitotic counts and so forth by a molecular technique. I don't know if this was KI. Here's the technique that they used, which identifies all the cycling that's in a cell. And with that, it was the same between the resected and between the core biopsy. Her point was, if this is still on a microphone, once that tumor goes in formalin, it's not dead. Those cells are going to continue to go through the phase if they started it, but the one that's the most exhaustive in that cell cycle is metaphase, and that's where they got arrested. So the metaphase numbers, quote, increased. The metaphase is the single band. It's the easiest one for us to recognize. So she thought that was the explanation for the differences in the counts. Aaron?
I was just going to ask why she decided that the resected ones were overestimated rather than the biopsy being underestimated. How did she decide which was the accurate numbers? Because of the
M1B and KI67 that they did on, yes. So that was her gold standard of what the total number of cells that were in a cycling phase. What it points out is we need to be careful along the way. And if you want to do another aspect of the study, there it is. What I love about this, Tony, is this is PATH. You know, we don't need the molecular technique. We need one, as Aaron pointed out, to compare it to. Which one are we going to believe? But this is great. We can all do it. All right, now I'm pushing the limit. Where are we going to count? At the periphery. The idea is that these cells that are out here are more invasive. Those cells are more aggressive. They may be more predictive of what's actually going on. So they suggest it's out here. Ask me where it's more important. I don't know. And I won't know until somebody does the study. So count mitotic figures in the center. Count mitotic figures over here. We don't need the oncologist. If you don't get a difference, think what a nice contribution that would be to the literature. You can use a random starting point. You can use the periphery. You could use the center, or you could go find the highest degree of cell proliferation. And you started the counts there, and there was no statistical difference. Wouldn't that be useful to all of us? Or, I don't know what the results are going to be of your study. Maybe there is a difference. And maybe the counts out here are higher than the counts elsewhere. Now we need oncologists. Now we need outcome assessment. But the first step you can do without all those people. The idea is the fixation is more optimal out near the periphery and so forth. So there's ways to defend that. This would be starting in a high area proliferation. This might be at the invasion front. I don't know. Do the experiment. Do the study and you find out. But then at some point, you're going to need outcome assessment. Same thing, and I won't take up time with too much with this, but margin assessment now by the clinicians are considered equally important or more important than the diagnosis. I think that's overrated, but that's how they'd feel if you polled those individuals. I don't know how you do your margins here, but I suspect it's on a glass slide. And then I don't know if you put a ruler on the glass slide and do macro, or if you use a stage micrometer. But I know what I want us to do: standardize how we all do it so that we report it the same way. And when we do, we should call that histologic free margin. Paul and I were suggesting just use some sort of ballpark, meaning it's right at the margin, it's some short distance, or it's that far away. Because when we report out it's 2 millimeters, I think that suggests a level of precision for our measurement that's beyond the technique we're using. And yet these clinicians could be using it to decide, I need to go back and resect more tissue. And as you know, when they send you a resection of a prior removal, oftentimes we don't find the tumor that's in there. And they say, well, the report said there was tumor left. That correlation is not good, and we know that with the soft tissue tumors. You could use the distance that you know with your ocular to report it. The point is, we got to standardize what we do. And one thing we do is histologic free margin. And think what a small amount of the total margin we measure. Maybe 4 measurements, maybe 2 measurements, and you got a tumor that's a circular ball. And then there's shrinkage. So in human tumors and with animal tumors or with different studies, we know that shrinkage is somewhere between 20% and almost 50%. And most of that shrinkage goes on at immediate removal before it hits the formalin or before it goes into a paraffin block. But shrinkage can be that great. So when we measure the tumor and we talk about the tumor-free margin, it's in fact falsely decreased. The tumor-free margin is much greater because of this shrinkage event that happens. If you want to know the tumor-free margin, somehow you'd have to come up with a technique that actually measures that within the patient. So apparently on human tumors, if they get 1 or 2 millimeters, they're happy because they know that that equates to 4 to 5 millimeters. So I wish we would state exactly what we did. The histologic free margin is blank rather than the tumor-free margin. And that exact number implies a level of precision that I think is beyond our technique. So that's what this is too much to ask for, to get pathologists to agree on all these different steps along the way. But the very first one should be very easy to do. 2.37 square millimeters, because you're already doing that. And look, we need to look at some of these other studies, and this one was done with Mike Goldschmidt as well, that for many of these tumors, they're going to recur even if tumors at the histological margin. So if it's a high-grade mast cell tumor and there's no tumor at the margin, it's going to recur. If it's a low-grade mast cell tumor and it's not at the histologic margin, it definitely will not recur. If it's a low-grade mast cell tumor, it's at the margin, it's not going to recur. Outcome assessment is absolutely critical. Here's another one we measure, necrosis. How do you guys do that? Gross? Histologically? What do we tell the person who's trimming in the tumor? Avoid the area of necrosis. And then what do? We use necrosis to assign a grade for some tumors. We've already biased the data. We got to standardize what we do. The human with their soft tissue sarcomas, and they're heavily filled with liposarcomas, which is rare in vet medicine, they use gross and histopath. From polling my friends, they all just use histopath. Standardize the techniques of what we do, and then standardize the cutoffs that we're going to do. I explained this one to you. The literature says use 50%. The report that's out there determined it was at 10%. Oncologists I've asked, never use 10%. And the pathologists, they don't report it at that. So I'm not saying we remain antiquated, but we do need to standardize some techniques, bring in these new techniques, but compare the two so that we're reporting something that we all can do. And then the follow-up data, we really need a lot of autopsies in these studies, and right now they're abysmal, the number of autopsies that we get in our studies. And this is important. This is what it's ultimately about, better patient care. But the goal of counting mitotic figures is not necessarily to find the average number, and it's not necessarily to find the greatest number. It's to determine what number correlated with an outcome, prognosis or treatment. That's when we need the oncologist. And that's when they have to collect their data for follow-up assessment as carefully as you assess your technique. And right now, I think they do a very poor job. Take that one off Facebook. Right now, I think they do a job, but I don't think it's as good as it should be. It's a phone call to the owner. Do you remember Willie from 3 years ago? How's he doing? There is no autopsy. Read these studies and find out the number of dogs that they're reporting that there's an autopsy. It's not there. How do they determine there was a recurrence? They palpated it. Hardly ever do they have histologic confirmation that there was a recurrence. How do they determine that there were metastases? There was a radiograph and there was an image. I think radiographs and images are absolutely great for clinical work, without a doubt. They cannot determine that the same tumor metastasized. Have you ever heard of collision tumors? Sarah. Have you ever heard of a dog, golden retriever, having 2 tumors, 3 tumors? Manuscripts, the author can start that by carefully defining what a metastasis was. Journals, if they say there were metastases confirmed, then that should be us, light microscopy. It should not be from imaging. They should say presumptive metastases. All that I'm trying to do is get us to be honest with our data. So they got to collect it carefully. And then there's a practical level of what we do at our work. Right now, with mast cell tumors, everyone in this room can predict the biological behavior of 90 to 95% of mast cell tumors. I mean, who thinks that's good? I think that's fabulous. Did we do 100%? And we're never going to. This is biology. There will always be exceptions. We can predict 95% of the mast cell tumors. Let's call it 90%. The problem is we can't predict which 10% will not behave the way we predicted. We can't identify the low grades that do in fact be aggressive. We can't identify the high grades, the type 3s, that do behave benignly. We need the oncologist for that. Who thinks that dog is cute? If our report says it's got a mast cell tumor and it's low grade, what we've really said is there was a study done on a population of dogs with low grade mast cell tumors, and it was done by Williams. And he said that this should behave as a low grade. And the owner says, well, great, who's Williams? And this is my pet. How's the mast cell tumor going to behave in my dog? That's theranostics. That's predicting the biological behavior of that tumor in that dog with that dog's immune system. That's individualized medicine. And eventually it'll get that way for vet medicine where you can target your treatments. So personally, I think that's good enough. But people keep pushing us, and that's one of the reasons they push us. Well, I want to know not how a population of dogs with this tumor is going to behave, but how's the tumor in my dog going to behave? I don't know. You think any of these statements are true? The oncologists do survival time, disease-free intervals, and some other parameters. Wait a minute. Are all the owners have the same beliefs for the value of pet and their family? Some owners are ready to euthanize because of nursing care issues. Well, I know it hasn't metastasized, but I'm tired of nursing care of this weeping soft tissue sarcoma or mast cell tumor. Might the median income of the owners change outcome? And Taylor, we're using that stuff. You know, here's the average survival time of a dog with a melanoma, and yet it came from a very heterogeneous group of pathologists, owners, and tumors. The more uniform we can get with it, the better. If they take it to a referral center, doesn't that imply right away that they would like optimal care? And if the referral center generated the study, does that mean that data set would then correlate to Boone, North Carolina, and the common public? So outcome assessment, it's absolutely critical. And sometimes I just don't think they're as careful as they should be, but they demand us to be careful with the technique that we're reporting. You've all been involved with some of these tumors, and they ask you to repeat the mitotic count because you're right at the cutoff. When they do that with me, I give them the count, and then I say, you need another parameter to evaluate. Don't rely totally on just this one. But if they think we're that good, they've got to be that good. I mean, do you care what the mitotic count is? So there's also a practical assessment. I mean, some of these owners, you have to ask them, why'd you bring this cat in today? Like, was it okay? Did this tumor come up last night? Why did you wait this long? Duration of tumor that Bostock did for mast cell tumors is still very predictive of ultimate behavior. How long has that tumor sat there, had the opportunity to grow and cells to change in their particular behavior? But this uniformity of patient selection, we don't see that in our studies as well. So what's the value of the pet in this family if they're going to let it get to be that large to start with? And that affects our survival. And then in turn, we're trying to correlate that with outcome compared to a small mast cell tumor. You wonder how they even found it. All right, this is where it started. This is where it ends. That's what I hope you'll do, because 10 high power fields doesn't define an area. Then this we can just do right away. Here's the ultimate comment. Trust me. But it's right. I'd say do it. The studies all need to be done to make certain. That's the easy change that you can bring to your reports. That's the difference between a pathologist and the size of the specimen they want compared to what they send us. I've retired. You have to be flexible and versatile in the different job opportunities that will happen along the way. That's it. Almost on time.
Very good.
Now,